Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Junkyard Dawgcast. I'm Jordan Hill. Got the whole crew with me this week, Rusty Mansell and Kip Adams. There's a lot to get into on today's episode, but we want to start the only way I feel like we should. Talking about the news from Sunday. Obviously, tragedy struck Georgia football. Devin Willock, Chandler LaCroix, passed away in a car accident. Devin was 20 years old. Chandler, who was a recruiting staffer, was 24 years old. Obviously, the football program, the community of Athens, and really the fan base as a whole has been trying to cope with this news coming off the heels of the championship parade and coming off of the close of a really successful season. Obviously, football is on the back burner after losing these two young people so suddenly, so tragically. Sunday, I'm sure felt like a blur for a lot of people around the program. And, I felt like it was only right that we talk a little bit about, sort of what we knew about Devin specifically, because, we had a chance to spend a little bit more time. And, I went back this morning and watched when we interviewed him. I think it was March 29th. And Devin was in the mix. He was one of those guys they thought, could get in the mix. And ultimately he did. He wound up playing a good bit during that 2022 season. And, I didn't know Devin Willock that well. I made sure, on our board to make that clear. But, you could just tell from that interview we had with him, very team first player. He was asked about being on the scout team during the 2021 season, in the past, kind of coming up. And he talked about whatever I can do to get better, whatever I can do to help the people around me get better. And, in the aftermath of his passing, seeing some of the videos from those media days where, he's goofing off with his teammates, arguing about, he's a New Jersey guy. So he was talking about bagels over, biscuits and arguing with Tate Ratledge and those guys. And, see so many pictures of him smiling. That was the thing that I think's been what I've heard the most about Devin Willock, is that he was always smiling. Jason Holt on the basketball team talked about that yesterday. Some of those guys on the basketball team were really close with Devin and some of the other football players. They're not very far from the football facility, so they get to spend some time with those guys. And Jason Holt said Devin was always smiling. And, seeing the pictures of, Andrew Smart up on Devin's shoulders after the championship game. And, I just want to say, and I'll throw it to Rusty and then Kip, you can chime in as well. But, my thoughts and prayers are with everyone who knew both of them, Devin and Chandler. I can't imagine. Again, I didn't know Devin, and I felt like I was very much in shock at the news. So to have known him, to have played with him, to have worked with either of them, I can't imagine what those people are going through these last few days. And just wanted to send my condolences to everyone who knew them. Rusty, I wanted to just give you the opportunity to talk a little bit about your thoughts, your feelings after this news.
Devin was a young man that kind of came on the scene late for us. He was committed to Penn State. Matt Luke takes the job for Sam Pittman. And one of the guys that left the program when Sam Pittman left was Josh Braun, who went to Florida. What that did was open up a spot, an offensive guard spot. And Devin Willock had came to Georgia in June. I tweeted it that he had rode a Greyhound from New Jersey to Athens to earn an offer. Well, I don't know if you saw, but one of the first comments was University of Georgia former coach and off the field guy now, really the right-hand man for Kirby Smart, Mike Cabin. He responded on that tweet and said, hey, he rode the bus here twice. So that tells you how bad he wanted to be a Georgia Bulldog. And no disrespect to Penn State, but that's not where he wanted to go. And when he had the opportunity to jump on an offer after Matt Luke got here and a spot opened up, that's who he signed. And without getting into too many details, Matt Luke was one of the first people on the scene at the hospital. He's still pretty close to their family. So, as Kirby Smart and the team started getting the word out to some people, Matt Luke was one of the first ones they called. And Matt Luke, I think, was there around 5 a.m. at the hospital, spent most of the day with the family. His aunt and uncle live in Gainesville, so he had a connection to the state of Georgia. So you look at all those things, and Chandler LaCroix, obviously, when your work as a recruiting staffer, and she's a full timer, so she knows these kids, she knows their families, she knows their families sometimes better than the coaches do because they have to stay in contact. They're around them so much. So I had a chance to interview Mary Beth Smart Saturday morning in Athens, and we got talking about the Kirby Smart Foundation. Well, she brought up a young lady that was injured, Tori Bowles. She brought up Tori Bowles and said, this young lady is a huge deal, not only to recruiting, but us and the foundation, some of the things that we do. And that was the first time I'd heard her name. And then obviously the next morning, I hear her name. So, Kirby Smart, extremely close with her and these players. And, Warren McClendon, where do you go with him to, I had a text last night that Warren McClendon and Xavier Trust, about 6 or 7 players, went back over Sunday afternoon and just spent a couple hours just standing there. Probably didn't have to say much. They just wanted to be there and kind of, that's the way they're dealing with this, tragedy. So, I called you, Jordan, and we texted and talked around 7 a.m. I had gotten a text, and I wasn't sure, if that was even true, because I did the same thing you did. I Twitter searched everything, social media, and didn't see anything. So at that point, I thought maybe this is some bad information. And then we talked early and found out, obviously, that it wasn't. But there's no training for this. There's no training for how to cover this. There's no training. We really didn't know what to do with the message board, the community. But I think about Kirby Smart. I think about Stacey Searles, all those coaches that had to stand in front of those young men on Sunday. I heard that was a very, very emotional team meeting. I think Thomas Settles is a team chaplain. I heard he was just extremely strong in the moment, was able to meet with a lot of different people. Brian Gant, who is a huge key piece of this program, he spoke a lot, and he was, I think Brian Gant was the first person on the scene for any of this as a University of Georgia representative. So, he's got to deal with what he saw and those types of things. So I made a note yesterday, and I do have a connection in Athens that kind of knows people around the hospital, and said it was just even the people working there were extremely upset. When you have 2 young people, you have to bring their bodies somewhere for a little while. You got a third one fighting for their life, and all these University of Georgia players start showing up, and families are there. It just got to be a surreal moment that nobody has training for. So I pray for all those people, pray for these families, these coaches, these players. But I'll say this, what a year Devin Willock had. And you watch him in that LSU game, and what he did to Harold Perkins was a big piece of that game and how successful Georgia was. And we'll get into more and more about this as we go on. But I think Devin Willock was a guy that had turned the corner. You all saw, I'm sure Kip did the same thing I did. You go back and look at his recruiting profile, and he looks like a different human being. I mean, this guy was not in the best shape. I mean, but he was 6'6", 340 pounds, and he had worked himself into this position. So just really glad when you go back and look that he was able to be a key member of this team this year. And, a young man that wanted to go to Georgia. Obviously, when you ride 2 Greyhounds at 6'6" from New Jersey to Athens, Georgia, tells you how bad you want to be here. But my thoughts, prayers, condolences with everyone, first responders, staff members, chaplains, families, these players. It's just no training, man. Don't have the word. It's been a really, really hard time for everyone that's around this team, covers this team, involved with this team.
Kip, any thoughts, feelings you want to share?
Gosh, I mean, it's been nothing but thoughts the last 2 to 3 days. I mean, we all kind of posted on the board just our reaction. You hit the pause button on you can't really think about writing about football at that point. And this type of trauma, I mean, there is nothing more difficult than what they're going through right now. And if you live long enough, you experience the loss of someone in your life. And the fact that it's so difficult is the way it should be. This is not something that should ever be something we're used to or that we can prepare for. And the highs and lows, you cannot experience more of a high and low than what the Georgia program experienced 10 hours after celebrating, everything that they had been working for, winning a national championship, and just seeing the photos, of Devin Willock, seeing the photos shared by, a fan, a grandfather, Sam Kramer, of Devin Willock, just spending time with this kid, and seeing, Devin Willock having Andrew Smart on his shoulders, the smile he had on his face. These are not, it hits different when these are people who we thought had the rest of their lives ahead of them. 24 years old, Chandler as well. I mean, all you read and hear about and the reactions that have come since then is just, the smiles that they brought to the program. When you see a prospect like King Joseph Edwards talking about how, he had problems getting in to do the stadium celebration, and Chandler helped him. And, the impact that they had just inside the program, because at the end of the day, this is a family, and they've lost two of their family members, and for me, I lost my mom, a little over 2 years ago, and there's not a moment that goes by that I don't think about it, and it hits me. It hits me like it's the same day. I remember being in this chair when I got the call that my mom had passed, and being devastated. So to go from celebrating a championship to now being in mourning, and just the fact that right now that they are going through the grieving process, and it is, really important. The support system they are having to circle, and kind of come together and try to figure things out, and learn how to go back into the process of the day-to-day actions. I mean, the Georgia coaches had to go out on the road. And they didn't have to, but they went, they had the option. They were, given the option to go out on the road, and they're continuing, to move on. And that's kind of where we're all at right now, where, there's going to be developments in the football program, and the world is going to go on. And we just have to kind of learn to do that together, while still remembering, just the impact these two young people had, not just in the Georgia program, but throughout college football. You saw the reactions from other college programs pouring in, coaches, just anyone whose lives were touched by these two people. And I think it's just important for everyone to remember, how impressive they were, and to celebrate the life they had, but also to remember how quickly, it could be taken away, and that, we are mortal, and we do have a limited time on this earth. And it definitely was a reminder just to try to increase the value in every day and every minute, and a reminder just to tell your loved ones you love them. And that's kind of my immediate reaction, and just the overall shock should not go away. And I think the Georgia fan base and the program, they're all coming together, and they're all hurt, but everyone's going to, we're going to continue trying to do what we know what to do, and that is cover Georgia football and Georgia athletics in general.
Yeah, Kip talked about what I think will be my lasting memory was, after a long day on Saturday, that Devin Willock took some time to make a kid's day by taking a picture with him. And, nobody knew the magnitude of that moment and what was to come. But, I mean, to me, again, I didn't know Devin personally, but that shows me, I think, all I needed to know about Devin Willock, that he did something like that. Again, Saturday was a long day, but, I mean, he made that kid's day. And I mean, to me, that's about all I can say.
And Kirby Smart putting out the tweet Sunday night with his son. I mean, you know that he was laying there at 11:30 at night thinking about those two kids, and the picture of his son on, at the highest point of the year, they won a national championship, and his son's getting carried off the field by Devin. 8 days later, he's no longer here. So can imagine what he was going through and what he is going to go through. And you're going to go to two services at some point and bury two people from your football program. So, I mean, it's there's a lot left of, as Kip says, grieving time. There's a lot left going with these young men and young women. But these two services are going to be, whew.
And then Warren McClendon. You have to think about Warren McClendon also in the car, released from the hospital, expected to be okay. But at the same time, he's having to carry that with him, that he was there and, he is still here, and you have to be, the support system more important than ever with him, the people around him, making sure that, he goes through the process and that he gets, as many people to listen to him as he needs as he works through this process. And if and when he's, ready to return to football is secondary right now, because he's, like you said, the grieving process is going to be a different one for him because him being in that car and surviving. So that's something I've really been thinking about, with Warren and just the fact that, he was preparing for the NFL, the NFL draft, heavily on his mind after, celebrating what he did with his brothers and his family. And now he's definitely got a lot more in his mind and a lot to think about over the next couple of weeks and months. So definitely thinking about Warren McClendon as well. And also Torrey Boyles, still are recovering from the accident. So it's, 4 people directly involved and a lot of people, we're all affected by this, but Warren's definitely one to keep your mind on these coming days.
As we said, we want to extend our thoughts and prayers to everybody affected. I mean, fans as well. It's one of those situations where, as it was said earlier, I mean, this really is a family from within the program out, and everybody's hurting after something like this. And I think we can all lean on each other and try to move forward when we can. But obviously, it's a very difficult situation again. To have something like this happen. But it's one of those things that everybody can lean on each other to try to get through it. So we're going to take a quick break. We are going to talk about some of the news around the program, some of the other things that have been going on, the transfer portal draft things, but we wanted to make sure to talk about Devin Willock and Chandler LaCroix, and again, extend our thoughts and prayers to everybody affected. So we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everybody. Going to look at this time of year, part of the aftermath of a season is players moving on, getting ready to go to the NFL. And we've had that happen with Georgia. To this point, 13 players have publicly declared. We're still waiting to hear word on Cedric Van Pran and Ladd McConkey, so potentially that number could grow to 15. But Georgia obviously is going to lose some big-time contributors to that 2022 national championship team, as we expected. I want to start with you, Rusty. What of these guys are leaving for the NFL? Both, the group that had exhausted eligibility, which would have been Stetson Bennett, it would have also been Robert Beal and Chris Smith, and also the guys who have declared. Which position group do you feel like is hurt the most as far as the losses to the NFL, or if there's just a single player that the loss of him going to the NFL is the biggest that Georgia has to fill in this coming year?
It'd have to be quarterback. I mean, I've said this a million times. Stetson Bennett, one of the best big game quarterbacks I've ever seen. Now, he would come out and he would go 13 for 18 with no touchdowns against a Missouri and a Kentucky, and some of those games he played in Kent State, you just looked like he was average as grits. But I'm telling you right now, the bigger the moment, Stetson Bennett balled. And I don't care what your opinion of him is, and we can talk about his Saturday demeanor at some other point. But when you start talking about the fourth quarter of the national championship against Alabama, he was 7 for 7. When Alabama took the lead, he went 7 for 7, 2 drives, 2 touchdowns. And then when Ohio State was up 14, he goes 10 for 12 for 203 and 2 touchdowns. And then just carved up TCU like a Thursday afternoon walkthrough, to be honest, for lack of a better term. So to replace Stetson Bennett is the absolute question in this offseason, because I think Georgia has built a roster that is deep. They have sustained the most draft picks in the history of college football, and they won the national championship again, and then they went 15-0. They lost some people. They got some guys that left. But I think Chris Smith is the second guy that I would think, because Chris Smith, along with Stetson Bennett, I think Kip would agree, outplayed his ranking by a million times. And I still don't think that Chris Smith is the most athletic dude, but he is one of the most instinctive football players. And I'm very curious of how the NFL will evaluate him, because Chris Smith can play every special teams and he can play in dime package for sure, I think, in NFL. So he just loves the game, and he got so much better. And he's not going to blow people away with his – I don't think he's going to blow people away with his workout, but I think his tape and his football intellect and his tackling ability, Chris Smith, would get you to the ground. And I think that's where I think that those two guys, if you want to start talking about the senior guys, you have to start with Stetson Bennett. And then I think you say who is going to be opposite, who's going to play that safety, because to play safety at Georgia is a hell of a job to make those calls for Glenn Schumann, Kirby Smart defense.
Kip, specifically on losing Stetson and Chris Smith, what are your thoughts and the impact of losing those guys and whoever's going to step up in their place?
Specifically with Stetson, you have to hope that the other quarterbacks in the room were watching him. I think we got extra access in the college football playoffs and the SEC championship to the team. And what really struck me was, the players really started coming out and telling you how much of a film junkie Stetson Bennett is and just how much work he put in to his opponent. When you start hearing that he was there 10, 11 p.m., Cedric Van Pran would text Stetson about something he saw, and then Stetson would walk into the offensive line room and say, I was just watching something like that. I'm watching film too. He may not have double degrees coming out of Georgia, but Stetson definitely got his PhD as far as football. He spent as much time as he possibly could trying to be the best quarterback that he could. And I think, whether it's Carson Beck, Brock Vandagriff, or Gunnar Stockton, you got to hope that they saw that and it rubbed off on them and they have that same mentality. They might already be like that, but you definitely, that aspect of Stetson Bennett, you definitely, hope that they bring into next season, because, that's when in a Todd Monken offense, you're going to have to, be able to know a lot of formations, a lot of looks, a lot of the same looks, different plays. And they ask a lot of their quarterbacks at the line of scrimmage, and so that's real big. And yeah, Chris Smith, the impact that he had, and the guy just made plays. And Rusty's right. If we're talking about what he put on film, he should go at the end of the second, maybe early third round. That's the type of player he can be at the next level. I think, testing, he's not going to blow up the combine. He may do pretty well, but we're not talking about, a guy that's just going to, people are going to be looking at their watch and wondering like, wow, how did I miss that? I think that, he might measure okay. We'll see. But as far as what he does when he's on the field, he's one of the most productive safeties Georgia's ever had, and we're going back to guys like Sean Jones, just a guy that when he's on the field, he found the football. He didn't take bad angles, and he is not afraid to lower the shoulder. You couldn't ask for anything more than a safety. And he was not a guy that, got you a lot of penalties. And in today's game, with the emphasis on safety, And you have a very small window to where you can, lower the shoulder into a guy. And Chris Smith, he had that down. And he's not the biggest guy, but still, when he hit you, you knew it and you could hear it. It popped. So definitely just a big time player there. And I just to continue that, a real big thing in the offseason for Kirby Smart every year is where is he going to find his leadership from? And I kind of look at that edge room, Robert Beal obviously being around the program a long time, but also Nolan Smith, even when he got hurt, his impact on the program was seen every single day. I mean, you didn't go a day or two without having a video put out by Georgia, or you just seeing it in the college football playoffs, his impact on the sideline. He was basically another support staff member out there, another coach on the field. And so I think that room is obviously going to be a lot younger next year. They're going to be asking a lot of, some freshmen probably. And so that's kind of that's a big loss in that position room with the loss of Robert Beal and Nolan Smith. Just a lot of experience. These guys have played a lot of football and to see the highs and lows. And so now you're kind of asking much younger guys, Chaz Chambliss, Marvin Jones Jr., Darius Smith. These are guys that you're going to be looking upon to kind of step into those roles. And those are pretty young guys to ask to step into those roles. So it's just, where is that leadership going to be on the defense going into next year, next spring, is something that, we'll all be watching.
Yeah, the leadership aspect of it is something that really intrigues me. And I wanted to make sure I mentioned too, you talked about Stetson Bennett watching film. Talked to Brock Bowers after that game, after the national title game, and just asked him about Stetson. And he said, man, there are mornings I'll wake up and I'll have a text from Stetson at like 1 or 2 a.m. Hey, I was watching film. I saw this. He's like, Brock was like, man, what are you doing up? Do you not ever sleep? But I think that goes into what Kip was saying, and the big piece of what they're going to have to replace. Whoever wins this job, there's going to be a little bit of growing pains because this is going to be a first-time starter at this level.
One thing I'll say too, with the schedule, the way it's set up, and they don't really get tested. I think they got South Carolina at home.
At home, yeah.
I mean, they really might not get tested until that Auburn game, tested. So you just don't know. We could be sitting here mid-October going, what does Georgia have at quarterback? Because they could potentially just run through people again. So I think this is going to be real fascinating. I think the decision on Cedric Van Pran going or staying is going to be large. And I say that I didn't really know how big of somebody just said the Tennessee game. The Tennessee game is the second to last game this year. I don't know if people know that. That will be right before Georgia Tech, which is crazy. We got all offseason to discuss that, but I was shocked at how late the Tennessee game is. But I didn't realize how big a, I would say, role that Cedric Van Pran plays. I was told by a couple of people that he was the guy. I mean, he is the guy in the locker room. And if you notice, he was the one that rode in the front of the parade with Stetson. So if they're able to get Cedric Van Pran back, that means you don't have to replace a quarterback and a center. So this decision, as far as on the field, off the field, going into next season, this was a big one. If he winds up staying, that is a huge deal for this football season for University of Georgia, because he is. I was told by a couple of people in that building, point blank, he's the guy, 100% the leader, offense, defense. It didn't matter. When Cedric Van Pran talked, it meant something. So if they can keep him, this is going to be a big decision when this comes out at some point this week.
We're recording this right around 12:30 on Tuesday, and I say that because I want to talk a little bit about the transfer portal, and things could potentially change by the time you're listening to this. Georgia, to this point, and this goes back to December as well, said 8 players go in the portal. You got Dominic Blaylock, you got Brent Seither, who is going to Georgia Tech, Rylan Godey, offensive lineman Jacob Hood, defensive tackle Bill Norton, who is going to Arizona, inside linebacker Tresman Marshall, outside linebacker MJ Sherman, who's going to Nebraska, and cornerback Jaheim Singletary. I'll start with you, Rusty. What do you make of the people who potentially are leaving Georgia, going through the portal, the significance of any of those losses as we look to 2023?
I spoke in depth with MJ Sherman's family. I've known them for a while and have covering him in recruiting. I spoke with Dominic Blaylock's family. That's how I broke it last night. I'm not going to hide that. It's nobody wanted to leave Georgia. Nobody was like, we can't wait to get out of here. There was a lot of discussion on whether or not to leave. And I think when it boiled down to it, it's, can you start? Can you get more touches? You've won back-to-back national championships. You look at Tresman Marshall. Tresman Marshall did 4 years at Georgia. I mean, he's done what basically what he signed up for. The ability to go play somewhere, to me, it sounds like it's going to be Oregon for him. I was just texting with Don Blaylock's family. I think Colorado and Michigan are two schools that jumped on him first thing this morning. So we'll see. I know Georgia Tech, which would be crazy to see Don Blaylock play at Georgia Tech, but with him, I don't think it surprised anybody. He's looking at an IT degree and some of the classes at Georgia Tech, some of the classes at Michigan. He's not just trying to get football touches for an NFL career. He's thinking 40, 50 years down the line, what am I going to do? So there'll be some options for him. But the two particular discussions I had with MJ Sherman's family and Dominic Blaylock's family was like, can we get more reps somewhere and take what we left, the product we are coming from University of Georgia. Teams are fighting over these kids. I mean, teams are fighting over the Georgia players that are going to portal. And that tells you, I think Dominic Blaylock maybe got 140 something snaps. Harris Jackson got 210 from what I was told. So, you look at those reps and you got new guys coming in, and maybe you get somewhere where you get 250 snaps. So I was surprised that Dominic had 2 years left. That's crazy, all this COVID stuff, but he played as a true freshman, if you remember. So he's got 2 years left. MJ has 2 years left. So look, both of those kids did it the right way. I don't think either one of them came to California thinking this is the last time I'm ever going to put on a Georgia uniform. That's just the way things work out. But that's kind of the beauty of the portal. Those kids came to Georgia. They gave it all they had, played their asses off, never gotten 1 ounce of trouble, either one of them. Never was on a 6 a.m. run, anything like that. They did what they were asked to do, and now they're going to play somewhere else. And I think Georgia fans should cheer them on. And if Dom ends up at Georgia Tech, you may not cheer him for one game, but that's just the way it is nowadays. But both are really, really good young men, great families, and they're thinking 40-year deal. Both of them extensively went into, I know MJ did, what his education and what he could get at Nebraska degree-wise.
Yeah, no doubt. Those guys contributed in a number of ways for Georgia, and there's no denying that. And like you said, Georgia fans should root for them, even if they go to Atlanta, guys. Even if you got to hold your nose, just do it and just do it for those guys. Kip, what's your take on the 3 guys Georgia's landed to this point? Ra Thomas, Dominic Lovett, Smoke Bowie, the 3 transfer portal guys that will soon be joining the program.
Yeah, last year Georgia went after some guys, weren't able to get any. Had I think 13 guys leave via the transfer portal and had 9 leave the year before. So, this is just the way it is. It's going to be like that on an annual basis. But the guys that they have coming in, when Georgia gets someone from the transfer portal, you should probably pay attention, because they're not going to get guys just to go get guys. They've had some big impact guys in the last few years from the transfer portal. And I think you kind of look at the wide receiver position in general throughout the year. When we were talking about it, it was, they had issues keeping guys healthy, and they had issues with guys being able to get separation. If Lab was kind of the guy they had to lean on throughout the year. And you're talking about 2 guys that led their SEC programs in receiving last year, in Ra Thomas and Dominic Lovett. I think Dominic's guy you put right there in the slot. Whether or not, Lab McConkey comes back, you're going to need, more than just him. I think toward the end of the year, he was banged up. And having another guy and a guy that could, play just as well at that position would be huge for Georgia. And then again, Ra Thomas, they went basically the whole season without A.D. Mitchell. For the second year in a row, the guy that we thought was going to be that number one receiver at Georgia was, had a overall minimal impact, made big catches when they did have him. But you had to go from point A to point B mostly without him out there. And I think Ra Thomas is just one of those guys that has the size, the ability to, the catch make some contested catches. That's huge. And, you add those two guys, and also Smoke Bowie, whether he plays safety, where he comes in and plays nickel, DB, is the position that you should basically, when you're asking where someone plays in Georgia's secondary, just say DB, because it depends on the looks. It depends on, what formation they're going up against. They want to have guys that they can go out there and give offenses different looks all the time. And I think Smoke Bowie's a guy, obviously, out of Bainbridge that Kirby Smart wanted the first time around. And, whether or not, he had the impact at Texas A&M that, people thought, most of that recruiting class didn't have the impact at Texas A&M that people thought when they brought in that all-time high-scoring recruiting class. So I think, it's a guy that Kirby Smart trusts in his own program. He can come in and make an impact and buy into the culture there. And so you're able to get a guy like that in that had a lot of talent coming out of high school, a guy that's explosive, could potentially help out in the return game as well. That secondary, you got to retool there, and you also got to just think about the future. So I think it's a big addition for them, and you got to like what they brought in. 3 potential impact guys. Like I said, you're going to lose guys every year. It's just the way it is, and there's normal attrition before the transfer portal. People left the program before they had the chance to be eligible immediately. So it's kind of just standard operating procedure now. And I think the Georgia program overall, the guys they brought in, it looks on paper to be, stronger than where they were before.
Before we get out of here, I got to do my Georgia men's basketball minute. Georgia men's basketball is 13-4, guys. 3-1 in SEC play. They beat Ole Miss 62-58 on the road. That was their first road SEC victory since February 2nd, 2021, when they beat Auburn.
If they beat Kentucky tonight, you and Kip need to do a podcast tomorrow on basketball.
Yeah, we'll do it live. I'll call Kip. Kip we'll Zoom it live if they win. If they win this one legitimately, they play. If you're listening to this live, if you're listening to it after the fact, the game is at 9 p.m. Eastern time on Tuesday. If Georgia beats Kentucky, Georgia, I think, is about 11-point underdog. Mike White, SEC Coach of the Year.
That is not incredible if they win this game.
Yes, they're going to have their hands full. Oscar Tshiebwe, 6'9", forward for Kentucky, reigning SEC Player of the Year. Going to have a very tough matchup in that, going up to Rupp Arena. But a lot of credit to what Georgia's done so far. 3-1, only loss so far was on the road to Florida. Cario Oquendo had probably his best second half of the season. Didn't have any points in the first 20 minutes against Ole Miss. 15 in the second half, 10. His final 10 were Georgia's final 10. Georgia was down 4 points with about 4.5 minutes to go. They rally. He just puts on a show, and they get that big road win, which, again, meant a lot to Mike White, a former Ole Miss point guard. Going back to Oxford and coming out with a win was big. Big test playing Kentucky, and then you play Vanderbilt at home on Saturday, a very good Vanderbilt team, that I believe just beat Arkansas, if I'm not mistaken. So this has been a very impressive start. You've gotten into SEC play well. And at this point, they've already tripled their SEC wins from last season, which was not a very high bar to hit. But a lot of momentum and a lot to like so far with what Georgia men's basketball has been able to do. And, yeah, if you're listening to this live, tune in 9 p.m. Eastern time tonight, ESPN, Georgia versus Kentucky. Georgia's a big underdog, but should be a pretty good matchup.
If we're doing, I'm not sure if we have a subscription offer right now, but we just put on the board this morning, Kirby Smart staff back out on the road. Obviously, you got to kind of take those steps because of the time frame and those types of things. But Georgia, we have confirmed seeing at least 2 5-stars a day. Kirby Smart will see one play basketball tonight, and we'll have a lot of good stuff out the rest of the week and still finishing up this class and where the coaches are going. So always say it's a good time to join, and I hope you guys give us a chance. Kicking in for a couple of weeks. If you don't like it, cancel it.
Use that Paramount Plus, man. Go watch what's on there, too. You get all kinds of good stuff with the subscription. So we'll wrap this up. I want to say thanks to Rusty and to Kip for popping on. Appreciate everybody listening, everybody watching. Mentioned in the message board, I also want to thank everybody in the junkyard. I thought everybody was very civil these last few days. Everybody was there for each other, and I really was struck by that and appreciated the support that everybody showed each other. So we're going to get out of here on that. Thanks again to Kip and Rusty. Thanks for everybody watching and listening. Until next time, take care.